The president's speech last night, curiously, is no longer about the president, with two of the four Republican responses further dividing an already fractured party. We, the independents, have grown intrigued by how the libertarian wing of the GOP is positioning itself in the face of superficial statism. It's not about what the president said. It certainly isn't about that middle school student council speech the GOP offered up as its official response. Oh, hi there from the yellow settee. Gosh, isn't this fun? What's more telling is the fight among elephants that's trying to pin down welfare and the role of government in an embarrassingly sluggish recovery. Could be great news for you and for us. So let's get into it. We're the Independents. Well, hello and good evening. Happy Wednesday. I'm Kennedy, and I'm joined by Reason Magazine Editor-in-Chief Matt Welch and Camille Foster from Free Think Media, because the man loves to freely think about things. And we are, the three of us together, the Independents. Also with us celebrating a frigid hump day on the eastern seaboard, it's Buck Sexton from The Blaze. My God, he can transition beautifully into adult film with that name. And that adorable Andrew Carell, Editor-in-Chief of Mediaite. Welcome, boys.
Thank you for having me.
Well, hello. Welcome back, Andrew. And your first time, Buck Sexton.
First timer.
Don't screw it up, okay?
I'll try real hard.
Your parents are watching. Socially and fiscally conservative Utah Senator Mike Lee gave the Tea Party response to last night's cotillion. And Rand Paul gave his own damn response because he has a lot of Twitter followers and Facebook friends. It is a little confusing as to why they both had to pipe up, but they had some good points, specifically about welfare. Here's what they said.
Congressman Mike Pompeo introduced a bill to end all federal subsidies for the energy industry so that business profits are won from customers, not through political connections. After all, if we're going to reform welfare, we really should start with corporate welfare.
I believe in an America with a strong safety net, but one that doesn't suffocate our resolve to better ourselves and our country.
I like Rand Paul, but he's getting alarmingly Clinton-esque. All right, is this good news for independents? Is it? The president, well, we'll get to him in just a little bit. What'd you think? Paul versus Lee, who prevailed in the battle of the Republican responses?
You know, I am a huge Rand Paul fan in general, and I think Lee cleaned his clock this time. And this is a message that I think is much more resonant, especially as regards welfare, than Rand Paul's message. Rand Paul spent about half of his speech talking about the culture of dependency. What happens if you get on food stamps, get on welfare? It sort of saps your initiative. It's not the fault of the welfare people. He wasn't calling them welfare queens or anything like that, but he was saying that welfare causes the cycle of dependency. There might be some truth to that, but it's a difficult politics to win in this country, and we haven't really been talking that way for the last 15 years since welfare reform. Mike Lee, I think rightly, especially in the wake of a farm bill that's being crammed down our throats for the next couple of weeks, is saying, let's do corporate welfare first. We can totally believe this whole cycle of dependency thing if you go after the billionaires that we're giving money to first. I think it's a more resonant message.
But Camille, how do you sell resolving and refining welfare to people who've been out of work for a long time and they're vulnerable and maybe they have grown dependent? I mean, how do you convince them that the free market is the only way to go?
I think it's a surprisingly challenging thing to have to try to do. I'm not certain that we can circle that square in the space of 3 or 4 minutes here. But I do want to note that despite the fact that these statements weren't coordinated, they were in many respects singing from the same sheet music. It was the points of emphasis that were different, but there were 3 responses, but everyone was trying to show you the kinder, gentler face of the GOP. That at least was very much the same. I do want to say that Rand Paul did seem pretty out of touch. It's almost like he got into a time machine.
Why did he do the speech? I understand why Mike Lee did it. He was doing the Tea Party Express response, which has been pretty typical for the last 4 years. But why did Rand Paul have to pipe in?
He's a maverick.
He certainly is. He's shaping up that way. When he's on, he's great. But when he's a little bit off, he loses the message. Did you love Kimberly McMorland Robertson?
No, I've received some heat from people for saying that I really thought that there was a missed opportunity there. She was fine, and in some sense, that role of being the rebuttal speech is really just elevating the person, whoever it may be. It was Bobby Jindal, and then I think people sort of thought of him differently in terms of a national contender afterwards. So in that respect, she was okay. But this is a moment when they should be pushing really hard against what the president's policies have done to the American people. Obamacare is an out-and-out disaster. It would be laughable if it were not so painful for the American people. So to come out and talk about apple picking and the county fair and 4-H and all this sort of stuff.
This little girl from Nettles, Washington,
this was
or
not
wherever
the time.
she was from.
I wanted some fire, some heat, and some swagger.
Well, and you also want some response, and it's like be able to react in the moment. Am I wrong, Andrew Carell?
There's an obvious strategy here, which was just that she is the school marm, kind of like, it was almost like she was reading a bedtime story. I would say the same thing if it was a man. It was this very condescending tone. It was almost like we're going to throw out this woman who's a motherly figure to show that we are not waging a war on women.
There's a way of doing that, and you can actually find some cool moms who say interesting things.
Cool dads, yeah.
And
it was like
people
Jim Dahl,
party
basically.
with.
It wasn't a gender thing.
She was a female.
Oh, yeah.
The way he walked out.
Everyone thought of him.
He
actually said, I think, at one point in that speech, I believe Americans can do anything.
They really can. They can fly.
Of the
and we can build monkey robots and scratch your back.
In fairness, Obama says that in every speech, too. Like, this is America. We do great things. We'll get up after every...
Yeah, because
we
of
like
the
to think we're
government.
better than that.
You can't do anything without the government.
I mean, Buck
well, speaking of the president touched on a number of issues and kind of compared himself to two stronger, more popular presidents. But did he make himself sound like a weak wiener?
If John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan could negotiate with the Soviet Union, then surely a strong and confident America can negotiate with less powerful adversaries today.
I know he tried to sound all strong and masculine, Buck Sexton, but he kind of sounded a little bit like a self-questioning dork.
Well, it helps to start with the name Buck Sexton if you're going to sound strong and masculine.
Right.
If that is your real name.
That's right. But no, in terms of the president on Iran, he said in almost the same sentence, certainly the same paragraph, we don't trust Iran. Like, we know we can't trust them, but don't put those sanctions on because we got to show a little faith here in what they're doing, guys. We got to trust them.
And we want them to like that.
That is nonsensical. You can't actually hold both of those positions. There's no reason for him to oppose or defy the Congress that wants to say, look, there's tripwire sanctions. You do what you say you're going to do, or else we're going to hit you with more sanctions.
But although the position that the president is actually advocating here is that we should not be talking about producing more sanctions and piling more sanctions on while we are, in fact, trying to engage in diplomacy with Iran. There are plenty of sanctions with Iran. The real question is whether or not those sanctions are working.
Do they work?
It seems as
Andrew Carell,
there's some sort of engagement.
These are delayed sanctions that say if you're trying to fool us, if you're not being honest,
I will
then
delay
we're
your
going to put more
sanction
on you.
because I want to hear what Andrew Carell has to say.
No, I mean, the sanctions haven't worked. We've seen it in, Europe has experienced the same thing. And, I think that basically what Obama was doing was pushing back on people in Congress who have been saying that, we need to just come down ham-fisted with more sanctions. And he's saying, we need to see what we can negotiate here. We need to find out what we can get in a nuclear deal. And it does come off as kind of weak compared to, say,
How did the rest of the speech play foreign policy-wise for you?
It was exactly what you would expect.
I mean, he gave the middle finger to China in the first two paragraphs. And then at the end of the speech, he kind of threw in a bunch of stuff like Africa, Ukraine, Asia-Pacific, and I'm done.
Well, that's actually a summation of the way he views foreign policy in general, which is sort of like a dilettante who swoops from one issue to another, never really engages in anything, doesn't actually have a policy to speak of, specifically on the issue of Afghanistan. He seems to have gotten a pass on the fact that he already admits, I don't really know what's going to happen there, and we had to surge troops because that was the good war. That means more people died over there, by the way. For what? That's the question that people should be asking him, given that he doesn't really have an end game, and it's like he doesn't pay much attention to it these days. He's got Obamacare.
Well, if you read the excerpts from Gates' books, he didn't pay much attention to it. He didn't trust anyone who was advising him on Afghanistan, and now we could be left with a bigger quagmire than we started with. So, Matt, here is my thing. I tweeted last night, the State of the Union is outdated, old-fashioned, and irrelevant. And I know the president is constitutionally obligated to keep us up to speed on where we are as a country. But do we need the dog and pony show? There has to be a better plan for the State of the Union.
Yes, here's the plan. Knock it off. Stop.
No more, right?
No more. Submit it in writing like they did for 100 years until Woodrow Wilson. Thomas Jefferson thought it was an imperious exercise to lord over the Congress and tell them their business in their chamber. No, don't do it. Instead, submit it in writing. The last person to really submit it in writing was Jimmy Carter as he was exiting. It's about 5 trillion words long. It's down into every detail. It's actually policy. Super boring, but it's about governance. It's not about stupid politics and pomp and circumstance that no one believes anymore. Knock it off. Submit it in writing.
Also in the 70s, I recently read this last night. In the 70s, they used to, the Democratic response, I think, when Ford was president, was just a call-in show, and people called in to talk to ask.
You can see that on YouTube. That is awesome.
So what we should do something like that?
There should be a call-in show. And by the way, in the 70s, they also had discos and cocaine. All right. Well, later on, we're going to have a real-life NFL player. He is a libertarian, and I bet he's also a pot-smoking homosexualist, if I had to guess. First up, we're going to explore the inner workings and deep feelings of one of our favorite tricksters of liberty, Penn Jillette, a man on whom you can bet he's worth a listen, and he is next.
Let's go.